Hi everyone, today I'm posting my video from my July tag for the 12 tags of 2014 challenge. This was where I started. This is Tim's lovely tag. I really like this one and did try to buy the Seahorse, but I couldn't get my hands on it just yet, so I'll have to wait for it to come into stock. And I'm going to show you now how and where this journey takes me. So starting with Tim's inspiration, and I'm going to give it my own little twist, and I'm going to take you on the journey to my interpretation. So I always start out with the same 3 by 6 inch tag, and I cut my piece of paper to 3 by 6 inches and then trim the top with my trusty template, and I'm ready to go. So it's a little bit chilly here in the UK today, hence my cardigan, and I soon realised that these sleeves are absolutely rubbish. I'm going to drag them all through my paint if I'm not careful, so I end up rolling them up. Can't take my cardigan off because it's too cold. So if now and again you see this great big chunky rolled up sleeve, you know why. It's not very glamorous, but it's keeping me warm. So this month I didn't really follow all of the gorgeous techniques that Tim showed us this month, and this is the first place where I'm going to go in a different direction. Instead of using my distress inks to create a seascape background, which Tim used, I'm going to be using my distress paints if I can get the lid off this paint. So you start out by just dotting several colours of distress paint onto your craft mat, and I'm using Broken China, Evergreen Bough and Picket Fence, and then I'm just spraying the whole lot with water, including my tag, just to get the paint moving, and then it's that swooshing technique. You do the same kind of technique with ink, you just get a denser amount of colour with the distress paints, and I'm just adding more movement to the paint by just layering on more water and encouraging it to move and marble across my tag. Now you may find that you like the result you get straight away. I decided that I just wanted more texture, more movement, as if there was lots of activity going on in my watery background. So I'm just moving the paint around and adding it in little layers and building up lots of texture by just drying my tag in between applications of the paint, and then just mopping up those little dots of paint as they become less and less on my craft mat. You can see I'm getting lots of texture by doing that. And then to create a few little bubbles, I'm just using a pen lid and dipping it into my paint, using it as a stamp. So over at the 12 tags of 2014 challenge, you'll see that Tim teaches you how to make sand or faux sand using embossing powders and distress glitters, and it really does look fab and realistic. But because I didn't have the products, I'm using real sand. Well, it's a kind of grit really. It's the stuff that you put on the bottom of an aquarium, and I'm just using a little bit of glossy accents to help me adhere the actual grains of the sand to the bottom of my tag. I think it probably makes my tag a little bit heavier than Tim's turned out, but it works, and using the glossy accents means I maintain the colour of my sand. And I'm just spreading a layer. You can see I'm using this lolly stick to try to not get my hands too full of glossy accents, but in the end you might find that you just have to get your fingers in there to make sure that you press down and get this sand stuck to the bottom of your tag. Once I was happy with the coverage, I put my tag to one side to dry, and I did lose a few little grains here and there once it was dry, but nothing too drastic, and using the glossy accents mixed in with the grit or sand helped to make sure that it stayed on my tag. I still wanted to add a little bit more texture to my tag background, so I'm just using the dauber on my distress paints, and I've just made sure that I've got a very light amount of paint on my actual applicator, and then I'm just going over and kind of blending out a little bit the background. So just stippling a little bit of those 3 colours onto my tag just to tone the background down a little bit, and I'm just making sure that I add a little bit more white to the edge of the tag just to frame it a little bit, and then again taking my heat gun just to dry everything off. As I said before, no lovely seahorse die for me to play with, but I found this gorgeous image on the internet and I've printed it out. So I'm It was actually this image that ended up giving me the idea for the colour scheme for my tag. I was going to go and try to replicate Tim's sort of crackled effect on his Seahorse, but again, I just didn't have all the products. I didn't have the crackle, so it was going to be a little bit awkward for me. But as soon as I saw this black and white image against my tag and thought about the colours that I was going to use, I knew that I wanted to keep a little element of that black and white print and just add small amounts or pops of colour to it. And you can see how I get on with this as the design progresses. The tail of this seahorse proved to be a little bit tricky, so I resorted to my craft knife just to get that last little piece out of his tail. So you can see here that the image in black and white does look rather good against the background, and you can see why I did consider for a little while just going completely black and white. I couldn't resist adding some of those gorgeous vibrant colours you see under the sea, so to speak. But I did print out a couple of starfish because, again, I didn't have the sand dollar die cut that Tim used, and I again printed out some little black and white images of starfish ready to use on the bottom of my tag. And it was at that point that I remembered I also had some gorgeous shell stamps. Those of you that follow me may know that I have recently become a member of the Rubber Dance design team, and I recently made a card using a gorgeous shell stamp, and I decided to use that again here for the bottom of my tag. So I'm using my trusty black archival ink and printing out my 2 shell stamps, and these come from the Beach Sentiments set over at rubberdance.com. And you can see they match perfectly with the black and white images that I've used so far. So you can see as I put these shells into place that I'm starting to build up that bottom area of the tag that Tim actually used his die cuts on, and I'm going to be using my stamped images or printed images in the case of the starfish. And you can see I could quite easily have kept this tag all black and white, and it does look nice, but I really did just want to have a little bit of that under the sea colour, and I hope that you think that I've managed to have a little bit of both on this tag. So I'm just making a little swatch of my Distress Ink colours, trying to decide which 3 colours to use. I'm going to use crushed olive, mustard seed and a little touch of peacock feathers. And as you'll see, I'm going to try and leave some of the stamped or printed images black and white as I work some colour into my project. So I'm using my Distress Inks as watercolours and blending out the colours so that I end up with a little bit of the black and white image still intact. I'm coming back in with the peacock feathers on the other side. So you can see that I'm keeping a little bit of the black and white image and then blending back out into the black and white. Now, strictly speaking, I'm using a watercolour, a water-based colour to add this little touch of colour to each of my images, and I do intend to use my glossy accents to give them a little bit more dimension and shine. So Distress Ink is water-based, and I'm going to wet it again by putting my glossy accents on top of my painted images. Now for some of them it works out okay because I've still got plenty of white area, but on my seahorse you'll see here I have got quite a bit of white showing at the beginning of the image, but after I've added my glossy accents, the Distress Inks have bled a little bit and filled in a little bit more of that white area that I'm leaving here. So if you want a real definition between your coloured areas and your black and white areas, you might be better off using a permanent colour such as a pro marker, just to make sure that it doesn't bleed when you add the glossy accents to it. I'm quite happy with how this turns out, but I'm just pointing out that this could happen if you use glossy accents on top of your Distress Ink coloured images. So here's the image with the amount of white that I've left on it, and you'll be able to tell how much that bleeds once the Glossy Accents has done its thing on top of the Distress ink. It, like I said, it wasn't something I was hugely worried about, but it wasn't my initial intention. And I'm just having a little test here on some black and white striped ribbon that I wanted to use, and I'm just using my Distress ink in the peacock feathers and the mustard seed just to colour in a couple of the stripes on the black and white ribbon. And again, you just need to be a little bit careful that your brush isn't too wet so that it doesn't bleed too much into the next stripe. So just be a little bit careful, and I've decided that I just want that stripe a little bit darker. So again, with my brush just slightly damp, I'm adding a little bit more ink to the first stripe. So it's always worth thinking about using your Distress inks to colour your ribbons, because it makes them match your project perfectly, and I really like how this has turned out. I have to be a little bit careful with this ribbon because this is all I've got. It's the last bit on my roll, and I just want to make sure that it works for all the little bits and pieces that I want to use it for on my tag, and you'll see how I achieve this scrimping and scraping of ribbon shortly. So here we go with the Glossy Accents. I'm going to cover all of my seahorse and all of my shells and starfish. And the Glossy Accents will give them all a lovely sheen, make them look a bit like epoxy stickers. So once you've got a lovely layer of Glossy Accents on all of your elements, then you're obviously going to need to leave them somewhere safe to dry. And this is where I start to make the most of my little bit of ribbon. I want to create some little fins from my ribbon. So I'm cutting 3 little pieces, roughly around 1 inch, maybe just slightly longer than 1 inch. That's going to give me enough ribbon to put at the top of my tag. And then I'm taking a small piece of double-sided tape, slightly longer than the width of my ribbon, just attaching it to the very end of the ribbon and folding it in half. And then I'm using the double-sided tape to pleat the ribbon. And then just finishing by wrapping around. I've just made a little fin that I can attach to the side of my tag, and I'm going to repeat that for all 3 pieces of ribbon. And considering my ribbon is really short, using this strong double-sided tape was quite a good way to make sure I catch in the ends of the ribbon, that I can pleat it up, and that it's going to stay in place on the side of my tag. So folding the ribbon in half and then using the excess double-sided tape to pleat the ribbon and then attach it to the back of the tag. So now I'm going to attach my tag to its frame, and I'm going to use black cardstock to do this and strong double-sided tape to make sure the 2 pieces stick together, particularly over that extra bulk that I've added with those ribbon fins. So going along with that colour scheme, the black frame will just make sure that your eye focuses in on all the details on the tag. So I like to frame all my tags. If you've gone to all this trouble to make these little mini works of art, you might as well frame them so that they're finished and you can hang them somewhere to display them. So I'm just adding a little touch of glue in between each of those ribbon fins because the card isn't quite attached in between those little strips of ribbon. So I'm just using my crocodile to punch a small hole and then a 1/2 inch punch to make a little tag reinforcer. And once I've got that in position on my tag, then I'm going to come back in with my crocodile and punch a hole ready to take the ribbon. So I'm thinking about how to loop my ribbon through the top of my tag, still being aware that I just might need an extra little bit of this ribbon, and I was thinking that I might be able to use this vegetable netting. It had onions in it. I just thought it might make a little bit of something that looks like a fishing net, and I thought if I tie it around the top of my tag, I might be able to get away with using a shorter length of ribbon rather than tying the ribbon around the top of the tag. And that's exactly what I'm going to do. I decided to make a little bow, and because this is sort of a plastic netting, it doesn't tie very well, so I'm going to use a piece of wire in order to fashion it into a bow. So I'm just using a small length of silver wire just to wrap around the netting to make a bow shape, hold the ends in place, and then I'm just going to use my pliers to flatten it down to make sure it's got a nice grip on that netting, because it's a little bit slippy because it's plastic. And then I'm going to use a little bit of the wire just to wrap it around the top of my ribbon to secure that in position on the top of my tag, and then trimming off the ends of the wire so that I haven't got any sharp edges, just flattening it down. And that way I do get to save a little bit more of the ribbon, and you'll see that it works out quite well on the final tag that I put this little piece of ribbon aside. I always like to look out for little places where I can add dangly elements to my tags. It gives a little bit of movement, particularly at the top of the tag, and this is always a good place to add a charm or two. So I'm just at the moment putting on a little silver starfish, and I may add to that later, and thinking about something to cover up the centre of that netting bow, because you can just see the little crisscross of the wire. And that's when I found this little knot of ribbon, and it was on part of a project that I was doing earlier, and it's been left on my desk. So you can see in a moment that that turns out to be quite a fortuitous find. And I'm thinking about adding the word band onto my tag, and I could do it either with the netting, but I didn't quite like the look of that. So I've decided to leave this little section in. If you look, I've just got a very thin strip of netting, which when you pull it out looks like barbed wire, don't you think? I'm not going to use it here because I don't really want any barbed wire on my seabed, but it's something that I might use on another project. It's just something that happened when I pulled the netting. I just thought it looked like barbed wire, and I thought I'd share that. So you can tell by the colour change that I've had a little bit of a break, went off to have my tea. My glossy accents are almost dry enough to handle, but they've still got a little bit of movement so that I can just gently shape my shells and my seahorse as I attach them to my tag. So now it's time to follow the composition that Tim had on his tag. So I'm creating my little seashells in the area of sand at the bottom of my tag, and I've got my seahorse roughly in the same position as he had his on his original tag. One of the elements that's missing on my tag is the seaweed, and I did wonder if I could just use these pretty pearl swirls to give the illusion of seaweed on my tag. So I think I'm ready to start committing. So I'm going to put down my little pearl seaweed to start with. So as usual, I'm making a little charm out of the logo for the 12 tags of 2014, and this is obviously the July upside down charm. So I cut out a small version of the logo, and then I'm attaching it to a piece of cardstock. This time I'm going to be using black to match my tag. And as usual, I've also cut out the image of Tim's original tag so I can attach it to the back of mine in the future when I'm looking back on these little mini tags, works of art. I'm going to be able to see at a glance where the journey started and where the journey ended. So I'm just turning this into a little charm by piercing a hole in the little ticket and then adding a little link . And I'm going to attach it to the top of my tag with the little starfish charm. Now it's time to glue everything into position. So I've just added a little pearl to the vegetable net bow, and then I'm using my glossy accents to glue down 3 little plastic, I can only describe them as bubbles, they look like little bubbles, and I've added them to the ends of my pearl seaweed. And as you can see here, I've managed to undo that little knot, and I'm attaching the 2 tiny scraps of ribbon that I had left, again relying on my glue gun to keep the ends in position. So I'm just adding some hot glue and then folding the little bits of ribbon over my word band, and that is going to serve nicely to hold this word band in position. So I'm not too worried about the fact that I've done this a little bit late and it's going to go onto the back of my tag, because I know that my little picture of Tim's tag is going to go on the back of mine, and that will cover up the ends of this ribbon and tidy everything up. So I've definitely made that little strip of ribbon go a long way, and there you go. That's, oh, just put it on the wrong way around. That's the right way, and that covered up all the ends of the ribbon. I'm going to add a little blue pearl onto my little group of charms that's growing at the top of my tag. So I'm really lucky that I was given a huge bag of broken jewellery by my friend Holly, and that has served me quite well for things like this tag. They're the perfect little bits and pieces to add to charms, to just add those finishing touches to tags and cards. So I'm going to add my main shell, and I've just decided to stick a little piece of the netting underneath, and that will hold that in position. Just deciding how I'm going to display a little piece of netting, and I'm be adding little bubbles in between the shells as I put them down. I've also got a little bit of broken mother of pearl, and I'm going to add that into the mix. Don't forget, if you ever put something down with hot glue and it happens to be in the wrong place, you've got the option of just heating it up a little bit with your heat gun, and that should release the glue enough for you to be able to take the piece off and reposition it. So I'm just tucking in little bits of mother of pearl in between my stamped and printed shells. More little bubbles, and then one more little starfish. As I'm thinking about whether to use foam pads or glue to attach my seahorse, I think my charm's in the wrong position. It's clashing with the top of my seahorse's head, which I'm sure he would find very annoying. So I'm going to move that to the other side, and then I'm going to use foam pads to attach, or foam tape in this instance, to attach my seahorse to the side of my tag. And then I'm going to use my glossy accents to add bubbles from my seahorse. And then I'm just adding a few more bubbles, just purely and simply to add more texture to the background of my tag. I just wanted to bring a couple more pearls into the actual tag itself, so I'm adding some tiny pearls to each end of my word band, and I've added 3 little pearls, you can't quite see them on camera, to the centres of my little ribbon fins that stick out at the side of the tag. As I was looking at my word band, I thought I wished that I had used the same technique as Tim to add colour to the actual lettering on the word band. So I'm going to do it now in retrospect. I have to be a little bit more careful. So I'm just pushing the paint with my paintbrush into the wording, and then I'm using a little bit of tissue around a barbecue skewer to take the excess paint off. Now it doesn't work quite right the first time. I think I left my paint just a little bit too wet. So I kind of rubbed it back out of the lettering, but I'm going to give it another go and just really push that paint into the indentations of the letters. And then gently wipe a little piece of tissue over the top, and you can see this time I've managed to get that paint to stick into the letters, and it just brings a little bit of colour onto that silver band, breaks it up a little bit and makes it blend it in or match better the project. So that's my July tag finished. I've just got to let that glossy accents dry, and I'll be able to hang it up in my tag storage. But Helen, what can I do with all these tags? They're so pretty, what can I do with them? Well, of course you can hang them on your wall if you want to, but I'm going to suggest that you pop along to my Etsy shop and buy the workshop for this project. It really is a fun project to make. It's quite simple to do. You can decorate them however you want, and you can put all of your tags inside once you've finished. So over at my Etsy shop you'd be able to purchase the workshop. It comes with all the videos and the photo instructions with all the measurements, so that you can work with me to create tag storage of your own, and then you'll be able to hang them up like this. And I'm just flicking through the ones that I've made this year. You can see that it really does build into a little library of inspiration that you can keep on your desk or on your windowsill, or even in your front room for your friends to admire. And it really is a nice way to keep all those lovely tags that you've made, so that you can take them out and have a look at them from time to time. So I'm adding my July tag, and as I finish off for today, don't forget to stay tuned to the end of the video for a few links to interesting places, one of them of course being my Etsy shop. I've got another little tag project I thought you might be interested in, and I've got a blast from the past, so a tag that I've made or I made last year. So lots of inspiration for you to take a look at the end of this video. So this was my July tag. I've really had great fun making it. I hope you have been inspired to make some tags of your own if you don't already, and if you are a tag maker like me, I hope that you've enjoyed watching me get from Tim's inspiration to my interpretation. If you like my videos, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. I'd love to have you join me on my creative journey. Until next time, thank you for watching. So the first two links that I'm sharing are for a trip back to my blog, back to 2012, when I made my very first tag, and there's a little photo tutorial over there. It was a very romantic Valentine's tag, and I decided to turn it into a present for my husband for Valentine's Day. And so the other link is for this memory board that I've attached my tag to, and I'll show you how to make the little charm that's hanging from the bottom of the memory board as well. So something very pretty to try your hand at, or perhaps you want to go and have a look at another pretty tag. This was from last year, and it was definitely very English looking, and Tim made, I remember, an American tag, and I decided to go with the British flag for my version. And finally, the link back to my Etsy shop. If you want to make tag storage of your own, please pop over there and purchase my workshop, and I look forward to creating this gorgeous project with you very soon.